We'll remind all the members, and again the public who are viewing online, that there are supports for people who may not feel okay between yesterday, overnight and today, in terms of some of the stories, testimonies that they will have heard, some of the services that you may have visited. And those supports continue for the members available here today, and for people who are viewing online, just visit our site on citizensassembly.ie and you'll see some provided supports or direction to some supports. And indeed, I'll remind the Assembly members, if you do feel that you need some of those supports later during the week, they'll be there for your availability, and we'll give you the contact details again before we finish. So what we just want to do now is all regroup. If you take yesterday, we had very strong testimonies from individuals, families, communities, people working on the front line of care services, of some of the harm that can be caused by the issue of drugs and drug use and addiction. I know then some really very impactful stories that will have landed with us all in many different ways, and I really once again want to thank all of those people who gave and opened themselves out to share those stories, share those experiences with us. It's a very brave and courageous thing that they've done, and I no doubt will help all of us, the Assembly members, in our deliberations. You also today will have had an opportunity to visit two addiction services, supports for people in addiction, in Kilmayan and in Merchants Quay, Ireland. And I know there you will have seen and heard some great testimony, to some bravery again, I guess some inspiration and some hope as well that comes through in terms of people coming through recovery services. What we want to do now is really, and sorry, also from the information stands that we have outside and people contributing their time to share some of the community approaches to supporting people and families suffering with issue of drugs and drug use. So what we want to do now for the next 30 minutes is give you time at your tables with your facilitators to share some of your experience. Your facilitators will bring you through. We do want you to consider one harm that you'd like to reflect back to us and maybe one solution, but your facilitators will bring you through that. And then we'll have a very short space in time, a minute or so, to go around each table and to get some reflections back. So now back over to yourselves and your facilitators, and I hope you did have a good experience this morning in some of the services. Thank you. on Livestream. If I can get your attention on all the facilitators, please. We're now fully back to Livestream. Thank you. Okay, welcome back and thanks. I think that's probably the longest time you've had a chance to have a deliberation around your table. So you've had an opportunity to share experiences both between yesterday and today. What I'm going to do now, if I can get all your attention, please, I really need to kick off this session. If I can get all your attention, we're going to kick off now. I'm going to start with table number 1. I'm going to give everybody a maximum of 90 seconds. If you can do it in a minute, great. And then I'm going to call randomly across each table, so be on your guard and ready to go. But it is really to reflect, as your facilitators will have said, one of the harms that you've experienced at the table and one of the potential solutions. And again, if you see something being repetitious, no need to say it again, but you can reinforce any comments in particular you'd like to make. So, but again, 90 seconds maximum. We need to keep this on time. So, okay, table number 1, if I can get your attention, please.
Thank you very much. We've come up with the disruption in family relationships and the impacts that has, the negative impacts that people have in their family. You know, people talk about the individual. This is about the family. The whole family suffers, and you know, that's a massive thing that we heard about yesterday. We had some great speakers that mentioned their experiences. Maureen was probably one of those people that shone in everybody's minds, and she was a power. She was such an amazing person. Her family has been destroyed by this stuff. We actually believe that, and I visited Coolmine this morning, the ladies, and again, emotional, because it works out there. It actually works, and it doesn't need to be reinvented. Jesse was with me. We don't believe it needs to be reinvented. We need to give them the supports. The ladies out there operate the management facilitation. They work, they help each other. Inclusion. Dignity. The state should be ashamed.
Thank you, and once again, I really do appreciate it, and I understand this is tough on everybody, and it's been a tough couple of days, and I really appreciate anybody getting up and feeding back from a table, so thank you very much. Okay, table number 9, please. Table number 9. Okay. Time is running out.
Hello. So we wanted to talk about the risk of harm for the fear, and regarding the family, for the fear of death and grief, the fear of loss of families, and from the wider society as well. We want to talk about the joint thinking, about having an institution be able to communicate together, to work together. We did also visit Coolmine, the main site, this morning, and it's a very well-run business model and very good management structure. They have 92 people waiting to be admitted in Coolmine, and they have a 70% success rate, and I think some people, community should working in with this problem should work and communicate together and make a way of this type of facilities.
Thank you very much. Well done. Table number 15, if I could call for a spokesperson, please.
So I suppose the thing that we looked at the most was the lack of services and the planning procedures. For example, we went today to the Merchants Quay, and they submitted their paperwork in 2017 and they're only getting clearance for it now. So these delays and looking at, you know, a person that's in the court system, you know, and they're told by a judge, you have 6 weeks to clean yourself up and come back to me, and you have a person with an addiction issue saying, you may as well send me off now because there's a 6-month waiting list. So the foundation, the framework for, you know, the individual and the family and society as a whole is just not in place, and the lack of communication between the statutory bodies such as An Garda Síochána, the ambulance services, the health services yesterday was actually staggering to me. They are hands and gloves, and it's not just to do with drug addiction, it's across the board for supporting the society that we are and we pay taxes for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And call on table number 3, please.
So this table has come to the unanimous conclusion that all of the issues on a communal or personal level, at an interpersonal or an intrapersonal level, such as fear, stigmatization, any general lack of funding or resources, they're all just in general sort of interrelated. They're all sort of communal in that regard, and what generally affects one affects them all in unison. That's it.
Thank you very much. If I can call on table 11, please.
We, on our table, we have suffering from a mixture of anger and fury and shame. It seems appalling that in a rich society today, we have a proportion of society which is basically stigmatized and ignored. Criminal records, clearly from what we've heard the last couple of days, achieve nothing. Prison achieves nothing. They go into prison and they have an availability of drugs greater than there is outside. So that's obviously of no purpose at all. I was talking to a man outside from Citywide, and he was saying that they are an organization, obviously very dedicated people, and they are essentially excluded from decision-making process. They don't want to be involved. The society, or whatever it is, the civil service, simply ignore them. They don't want to push them to one side. Certainly from this morning, we were all amazed and very upset by the degree to which these amazing women had dedicated their lives to look after each other and their children. Why we went to Ashley, why is there only one Ashley and one place like that in Limerick? There should be 30 of them. So the central problem is there's no funding, and there's no funding because society isn't interested. These are Irish people. We have to look after them.
Thank you very much. And I really do appreciate everybody trying to condense in the time that we have today to give your table feedback, because I know there's been a great deliberation at the tables. Can I call table number 4, please?
Thank you. I will just echo what everybody has said so far. And our table believes this is a crisis no less than the COVID crisis. And massive long-term funding is required to support services like Coolmine, both the men and the women's. There's integrated support in both of those places, and it's already being said, it works. 70% success rate for those who are lucky enough to avail of these services. But this society is in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call table number 2, please?
Thank you. We felt at our table that the harms are obvious and didn't actually spend any time talking about it, and found it a little bit frustrating that some of the focus was on that. What we saw in Coolmine and Merchants Quay was excellent and inspiring. Each had low or no barriers for entry, fantastic setup, needs driven and run by heroes. We need urgent scale up around the country. We need to see integrated services coordinated by a single unit. Excuse me. Somewhere, somebody responsible and accountable for ensuring delivery of services to everyone, clients, drug users, families and communities. Maybe is that the social inclusion services in the HSE? We also need to see long-term funding. There is a deep frustration for the fact that all of the services seem to be provided by charities. Health and services should be rights.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and points again really well made. Table number 8, please.
Yeah, we'd just like to reiterate what the other table said and to thank all the frontline workers and all the facilities who went today. They're really doing incredible work. Thank you.
Thank you. Table number 6, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, it's clear the current policies have not worked. They've failed. If anything, they've probably made things worse. We've got a burden on the justice system, which we need to deal with. Many of this doesn't probably need to be a justice issue. There's a huge burden on the health service. There's a huge burden on school and education. We would like a health-led approach, funding and regulation of addiction services, better practice models, maybe an implementation committee to ensure that what we do decide does get followed up on by the government. Thank you.
Thank you. And that point on implementation and concern has come through strong, I think, from members over the last while, whatever we come to recommendations. Table number 10.
So for the harms, we were thinking about families, and a quote from one of the ladies yesterday that she had to battle for the services. I think that's wrong. And for a mother having to go out and buy methadone on the streets, it's kind of disgraceful. In a similar sense, access to services for users, problematic as well. On the solution side, we saw a very holistic approach this morning in Coolmine that seems to work very well. And so when you look at government agencies and services, maybe a holistic approach there could benefit them as well. And if we can do it in organisations like CAB, for example, then we should be able to do it for drugs as well.
Thank you. Table number 7, please.
Hi, thank you. So in relation to the harms, our table agreed that from our visits this morning to the facilities, that reinforced a lot of what we had heard yesterday. So it was good to get that. When it came to solutions, 2 things that we focused in on were detoxification. There was a certain amount of frustration and lack of understanding on our part as to why the detoxification, the detox piece of the puzzle is so complex. You know, why are we relying so much on charities? Why are we relying on a system in which requires registered nurses to be in place to administer substances like methadone, and then those charities are competing with the public sector and the private sector for those resources like nurses to operate those facilities? And why is the state not more involved in providing detox facilities to link up those people who are experiencing the worst effects of addiction with their path to recovery? And the other thing then, which everybody found from making the visits to the facilities, what seemed to be working well was the reintegration of people who had availed of the facilities and had come out the other end with positive experiences of reintegrating them back into providing those services for other people. Thank you.
Very much so. Thank you, and again, some very strong points, well thought through, I've no doubt. Table 5, please.
Yeah, hello. So basically the problems that we found and the solutions around, like everybody who have seen the Coal Mine Center and other centers, they are working already very well, but they need to be scaled up. There's already many people waiting also for these services, and they don't have that chance to because of lack of capacity. So the models are working in this sense. And also we have viewed that each center is working alone, so we need a national strategy so that will like envision where these centers should be built and the capacity and so on, instead of each center working alone. And on the other side also, we need education. So instead of just focusing on the services, we need to educate people and children from early on so that we minimize the people which are flooded to these services and so on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I think last but not least, and sorry, somebody is the last spokesperson, number 14, please.
Hi, good afternoon. As we all have heard and listened over the last 2 days, we can see that the destruction of family members with drug users, it's not just the drug user that is affected by this, it's the family members, it's the children. Visiting the Coal Mines, the women's facility this morning, opened my eyes to a lot of things. And the benefits that they have, the success rate that they have, which stands at 85%. But one of the figures that's quite alarming, which happens to be the lowest, is that there's only 2 facilities in the country, one in Dublin and in Limerick. These facilities can possibly be the key. If not, it can be a significant step forward to breaking the cycle of drug use within families.
Thank you very much. Just to remind, have I got to table 12? No, I missed 2, I know that. And 13 as well. Thanks, Ellen.
In relation to harms, we felt that drug taking is both a consequence and a cause of mental health problems. It is a result and a cause of trauma. It causes loss of relationships and isolation. Illicit drug use leads to poverty for the individual and possibly for the family. Crime drives it, and crime is a consequence. We need a social transformation to a listening and respectful society. We need a whole of society approach from childhood to adulthood.
Thank you very much, Helen. And again, number 13, please, table 13.
Yeah, so I think at our table there's a collective frustration after today's visits, and not because of the services review, but because of the lack of support that these services have around the country. When we spoke about harms, we looked at the economic cost that's added to these deprived areas and the amount of funding that they need. And it's as a result of miscalculated spending through dated government policies. I think decriminalising the end user who suffers from previous trauma doesn't work because it only leads to more trauma down the line. But what does work is the coal mine approach, a therapeutic approach that the individual, of course, needs to have the will to go to, which in turn means investments are needed to support them beforehand at a community level. A peer-led holistic approach in a non-chaotic meditative environment is the best way forward in our collective opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. We're just a few minutes ahead of time, and this is your time. I'm trying to manage with you and for you. So we have a few minutes. If somebody would like to make another comment on the table, I'm quite happy to take it, because table number 9, please. Yeah, doesn't have to be the same speaker. If anybody else wants to make a point, okay, we'll take 2 more tables.
I can pass my mic to someone else if you want to.
No, carry on.
They just wanted to make a point. There is something common. Is all this is in the theme of drug use? Is the cause, the root is all coming from a mental health problem, and even though drug taking is a choice, it all comes from the root of starting with a mental health problem. So maybe we should start concentrating on developing, pushing more training for mental health. To be able to provide a wider support for the wider health system.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, Rudiger. And I think we did hear issues of dual diagnosis and lots of examples as well, but not always led by mental health issues either as well. I think it's just important to say that. Okay, table 11, please, and then table 12. We just see how we're fixed.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. What I would like to say is this morning that we were in the group that went to Merchants Quay. I apologise if I come across as I'm a little bit angry, to be honest. I left there with a sense of great sadness. There's a huge echelon of our society that we are turning a blind eye to, and we've been doing it since forever. We've all agreed at the table, plenty of other speakers have verbalised that we know some things are working. We know Merchants Quay is working. We know Cool Mine is working. Why is it not a simple no-brainer to put some funding behind it, help people? I think what I'd like to finish off by saying, and to try to settle myself, is that there shouldn't be another penny spent on a road or a street or a cycle lane in this country until we tackle the underlying issue of a massive cohort of our own people that we are ignoring. Thank you.
And it's quite okay and understandable to be angry. You know, everybody's been through a lot. Table 12.
I visited Merchants Quay this morning as well, and when I went in, I was very pleased to see that it was the first step in accepting or recognising addiction as an illness. And I think that's the most important thing that has to be recognised. It is an illness. The people down there have fought long and hard to get this centre up and running. They put in an application, they got acceptance in 2018, and it's taken 5 years to where it is today. The basement is just a disaster area. They don't know when it'll be finished. It could be finished in another year, a year and a half. It's not enough. And then the other part of it is that 18 months pilot scheme. So in 18 months after they're up and running, they have to go back to apply again for their licence to run this totally essential service. I'm angry, I'm really angry. I'm happy for them, but I just think there's such a need for many more of these centres throughout this country. And as another speaker said, we're spending millions on children's hospitals, which have overrun their budgets, and also cycle lanes, which have cost enormous amount of money. So we really have to get our priorities right for our people.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to, actually, just comment on that. I mean, I know it came up as well from the visits from Merchants Quay, the issue around planning and trying to get planning through, and the planning process, as has been related to, being very long. There's also the issue of objections to plannings and objections to these centres going into communities. So it's a planning process, but there also are very significant objections to go through when these kind of centres are trying to be put in. So that's another thing we need to address in society as well, to facilitate more centres. Okay, I'm going to go to table 5, Lisa.
In respect to the planning process, when the government wants to build social housing. They do it under a PPP that nobody can object to. So that shouldn't ever stand in the way. It can go in under a PPP build and the centre can go up and nobody will be able to argue. So I just think that's a bit of a cop-out. Not from you, but from the process.
I don't take any offence to anything. Sorry, table 5, I want to come in again, please. I'm conscious. It's okay. Sorry, table 9, if I can, first, and then okay. Table 9, apologies.
Good morning. I visited the Coolmine Gentlemen's Centre this morning, and it was shocking to hear that they had a facility up and running in Mountjoy where they were providing therapeutic services to prisoners. It had to be closed during COVID, which we can all understand, but it has not been reinstated. And the reason we understand it's not been reinstated is the prison service wouldn't agree to it. I think that's shocking. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I'm kind of pleased to hear some of the site visits today gave you extra insights into some of the barriers, not just from what we heard from families and communities yesterday. So it's really good to hear those relayed back. Thank you. Any other last comment or two? And look, it's not like me to say we have a little bit of time, but I'm just conscious this is an important process. Table 3. Is that table 3?
I think that these projects we've seen today, they're not big, shiny flagship projects, so they're not going to attract funding from governments. Maybe we should depoliticise all this kind of health service malarkey, because it's 4 years, that's all governments look at, is 4 years ahead. We should depoliticise it and put a certain percentage of GDP towards it, and that should be set in stone.
Thank you. Okay, one last comment. Again, I'm just really conscious this is in the room, table 7, please.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to point out, and I suppose it has been highlighted in other ways, but we see that how cruel it is to drag a person through the courts and put them in prison. But not only that, if we were to even to look at it in a more corporate or government standpoint, it is expensive to be putting somebody through court. And it is also very expensive. If I recall correctly from the previous assembly, it's some north of €80,000 per annum to have somebody in prison. Why isn't that money being put into rehabilitation? And I was in Coolmines, the men's one, and I know it's been highlighted a lot how it's shocking how well it works. And when they're not looked at as just a number and a statistic, you see them as people. They're literally like somebody sitting in the bus next to you. Could be exactly like them in Coolmines, and you wouldn't know it. They're not criminals. They shouldn't be treated like criminals. They're not serial killers or terrorists. You know, they're suffering an addiction, and they should be helped. And yeah,
well
that's
done.
very much it.
Okay, look, I did want to give that an extra bit of time, and I think you can get a sense from the room that it's been a very raw kind of experience over the past couple of days, and particularly now that you've had a chance to exchange views and deliberate around the table. But I certainly get that sense talking to many of you on the site visits this morning, but also just the sense I get in the room. So look, I'll try bring this assembly meeting to a close in the next couple of minutes, but first of all, can I just ask yourselves to give yourselves a round of applause how you've handled this weekend, please. And I will restate again, please, there are supports. If people are feeling not okay, that's okay. And there are supports here today, and follow on. We'll make sure if you need that support, it's there for you. And I want to thank the HSE councillors who have been on board all weekend and very discreetly doing whatever they need to do. So thanks to them as well. So look, just try and draw us to a close. A few comments of wrap up, but I think your comments have been the strongest that I can say. But I do believe this has been probably the most honest, probably the most raw discussion that has been had ever at a national basis, at a public level, in terms of some of the harms that are caused to individuals, communities, families, and the brave work by health and social care professionals. I think it's been a very true debate that's reflected exactly where we are in this really challenging issues. I suppose to stress what we've seen coming through has been all of the trauma that people and families were able to relay to us. And some of us may have heard that it was probably unnecessary trauma in some cases for people to have to go through. There were other ways it might have been made less traumatic. And that is part of what we are trying to do, to try understand it first and then think of what is the harm and what solutions can we put in place for all of those. But again, what we did hear, and it's reflected back in your feedback today, this strong issue around stigmatisation, marginalisation, particularly of some communities, more than others, criminalisation that happens and how that's just a vicious cycle thereafter. We also heard highlighted back to us yesterday, it's one issue when harm is caused by drug use and drug abuse, but when harm is caused by some failings of policy, of legislation, of services, that's just not right. That they are there to help people, and in most cases they do. But in some cases we've heard, either through policy, legislation, or indeed the services, people have suffered more harm. And that's not good. That's not good for the common good. I think, though, today we did see, and I'm glad many of you reflected at the tables, some hope, some inspiration, some fabulous testimonies from the services, from people within those services. Great hope, great resilience, great courage in both services that we will visit this morning. So, we do see many people have come through and ended up on the right side of things after suffering that trauma and after suffering that experience. So, and many people haven't. We should recognise that as well, and that's very sad. But many people through, I certainly came away, and I visited both centres, and came away with that hope, that inspiration. There is. But you did reflect in your comments in terms of the services, and we will be coming back in our next Assembly meeting to hear from the services, the various service providers, the statutory service providers, and as you have said, many of the voluntary service providers and what's called the Section 39 providers. We will hear more from them from the services perspective. And that'll give us help at the next Assembly meeting to get an insight what might be working, what might need to be scaled up. And you've already come to some conclusions, I think, on what needs to be scaled up. But I think that will start to help us think around some solutions. But look, I did say in my kind of closing comments yesterday, there is an issue for policymakers, for legislators, for Oireachtas, for elected members, to treat this issue with a level of urgency, to raise it to the level of urgency that it really needs. Because when we talk about stigmatisation and marginalisation, it's a few communities that suffer really badly and really worse. And you would wonder if the same stigmatisation and the same marginalisation was happening in all communities. And it is to some level, but would it really get escalated up further? I just pose that. It's not good enough that we don't respond to the level we need to respond because it's just happening in some communities. We know it's pervasive and all, but we know some communities are hurting worse. And we can't lead to some communities getting further stigmatised and further marginalised. So I again would call on people, treat this with the level of urgency it's needed. We will continue our deliberations up to now in October, and we will, with your work, provide solutions and recommendations. But it does need that. It does need that urgency, scale up, thinking, investment today and next week. And I call on the policymakers to think hard about that. So I'm going to close right now. It's been a very challenging weekend. I made all the thank yous yesterday, but just to restate, particularly to all the contributors who we've had over the last couple of days and the services that we visit. It's been truly inspirational for them to share their stories in such a raw and meaningful way to help us in our deliberation, and that is serving us in a really strong way. So I really want to send a message out to all of them. Thank you very much, and the providers who helped us bring people in too. And finally, just once again, this has been a slightly different assembly to organise logistically, but I do want to say, I didn't say it strong enough yesterday, to Cathal and Jerome and all of the team and the Secretariat. They've put together to do this logistically. It's been magic, just how they've organised it. So thanks to Cathal and the team. All right. So it's now 1 o'clock on Sunday, and with your support, we're finished just on time again. So again, thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the June Assembly meeting again. Thank you. Bye-bye. Apologies, just before you wind up, we can go off camera as well, but we just have some housekeeping from Cathal, please.